If it's okay with our panelists and with you, Michelle, I'll go ahead and kick things off. So my first thoughts tonight are just to welcome you all and to say thank you for being here. It's important to pass along that we had intended on recording tonight, but we want to make sure that's okay with people who are here. So if you're not comfortable with it, there is a function on the Zoom platform that will allow you to hide your identity and participation. So my sense right now is that it's not a huge issue with the 9 of us, but I just wanted to throw that out there, be consistent with Montana law, and you know, also respect your privacy and individual approaches to this subject. So tonight I have the privilege of welcoming Carlos and Julie and Larry to visit with us this evening here in the Montana decrim scene. I'm not going to spend much more time introducing them because I don't know them very well, and I think that I would do a terrible job. So please, let's see, Julie, if you wouldn't mind kicking it off for us, if you could introduce yourselves or yourself, and then follow suit, please, Carlos and Larry.
Okay, hi everybody. I am Julie Barron. I am with Decriminalize Nature Ann Arbor, and now moving into Decriminalize Nature Michigan. And I have been trained as a therapist. I've been working as a therapist for many, many years. And I devoted my practice about 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago, to doing psychedelic integration work. And so part of that work with clients was building community around psychedelic space, and then also became political advocacy work, was just part of my therapeutic work, really. It came out of there. And so with absolutely zero political experience, I headed up the Decriminalize Nature Ann Arbor campaign. And the only way that happened was with a really wonderful team of people around. And that includes Larry and Carlos for really just building such a beautiful, beautiful movement to begin with. And just being there every step of the way for us to support and to give us resources and to just be our cheering section also. And so, and my wonderful team in Ann Arbor and also in Michigan. We successfully passed our resolution to decriminalize entheogenic plants and fungi on September 21st of 2020.
Thank you. My name is Carlos Plazola, and it's nice to meet all of you. Hope your weather's doing okay there. It's a little sunshine and warm here in California, so we're good. So I'm born in Mexico, actually in California, but also grew up in Mexico for my earlier years. My background, I have a master's in environmental science. I have a bachelor's degree in anthropology and biology. I've spent some time living with indigenous folks in the Amazon rainforest when I was a young man. And then I became a social justice, environmental justice organizer. I've always had a deep connection to environment and nature. I also became a political organizer and activist. For a while, I was chief of staff to the Oakland City Council president. And in that time, I learned how to do legislation and do politics, if you will. I went into private sector for a while, and I'm a builder here in Oakland now. And then in 2018, I had a very profound mushroom journey that helped me heal a lot of stuff from my young days. And I recognize the power of these plants to heal trauma. Our commitment as Decrim Nature is to ensure that they remain accessible to anyone who would like to participate in building relationship with these plants for purposes of healing. And for us, that really means recognizing the needs of the most marginalized people in society and ensuring that someone speaks on their behalf to ensure and enable equitable access. That's our path, that's our lane, if you will. And we're pretty good about staying in our lane and advocating for everyone to have access, but particularly the most vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. Hello, everyone. My name is Larry Norris, co-founder of Decrim Nature with Carlos, and really been excited to working with Julie as well, who's been doing some amazing things in Michigan. Carlos and I started this in December of 2018 So it's been pretty amazing to see how quickly this movement has gone over the course of time. And hold on a second. There you go. How this movement has gone over the course of the last year and a half, I think I put something together the other day. We have 41 active cities. I know Philly's here. We got a couple other folks here. And that's pretty amazing just to see how much of this conversation is emerging out into the US right now and in all these different places, all these locations and locally speaking. So you're really building that local community, which I think is really important. I'm also co-founder and executive director of an organization called Entheogenic Research Integration Education, which started doing integration work about 10, 11 years, same as Julie there, which is pretty amazing. And we've been on this for a while. Back in those days, not many people were talking about integration. So it's really nice to see that's a part of the conversation. Integration being how do you support people after a big experience, a profound experience. I also wrote my dissertation on that. So I just finished about a year ago looking at ayahuasca and integration. So that's also a really big part of it, just trying to figure out how to help people make meaning of some of these experiences that don't really fit within a psychotherapeutic framework, but are still healing, still profound, still part of personal and spiritual growth, those types of things. As Carlos mentioned, we've been doing this for some time. It's been, amazing to see. And the growth of this is also something that we have to figure out. How do we sort of navigate? As Carlos said, we have sort of a particular lane. Every day there's these psychedelic startup companies happening, there's these big pharma companies happening, but really, really about keeping it in community, making sure people have access, making sure people can grow, reconnecting people to nature, which I think is a really important part of this, empowering local leadership, empowering people to grow their own, to gather their own, to be in community-based ceremony. These are all really big, important things that you'll see embedded in the resolution as we go over it tonight. But I think that this message really was something that people were hearing within certain particular medical models or clinical models. And I think that's why, we are helping to support everyone, but, it's not our movement, it's everyone's movement. And I think that's what's beautiful to see, just how many different people from all over the place are ready to jump in and protect our relationship to nature. So thank you, everybody. Nice to meet you all.
All right, thank you so much to the panelists for sharing that with us. So just for the people who have joined us, just to lay out a little bit for the structured, unstructured plan for the evening, is to just start off with a few big picture questions that I'm going to throw out there for the panelists to discuss. And then we're going to drill down a little bit into the local resolution that we have a current template and we have a current locally adapted model. And that model has made its way into some of the city council people's hands and into the hands of the mayor. And so we're kind of in a liminal space right now with respect to where things are going. So we'll dive into that resolution. We'll talk about it. We'll explore the language and how it's set up. And then from there, we'll get into some more questions after we do that. And I also want to leave time both for the panelists to explore any issues or ideas that they feel need to be addressed in this conversation. Then also I want to have some time for people who are in attendance, welcome everybody if you're just joining us, to ask questions, explore concepts, discuss this with our panelists as well. So you can either wait till that time or put questions in the chat box. So without further ado then, we'll just jump into some of the questions this evening for our panelists. So even before diving into the details of the resolution, one of the things that jumps out at me is that there's a term that's used, it's entheogens. It's not other terms that get used in wider society. So sometimes we hear psychedelics, sometimes we hear hallucinogens, sometimes we hear drugs, we hear a number of terms to talk about what's in this resolution. So I just thought I'd start out with some notes on language tonight and see what you all felt about the choice to use the specific term entheogen, why it's important, all those related issues. So if anyone wants to jump in, please do, and I'll just mute my mic and take it away.
Carlos, you want to go first, and then maybe Julie and I can finish it up?
You're the great entheogen guy, Larry. I'll go first. So I won't speak to the term entheogen, but I'll share that that the word entheogen really works for, I think, all communities, because it's so new to everybody that you're sort of you're sort of forced to ask, well, what is that exactly? Which then opens up the potential for conversation. In my community, which is the Mexican immigrant community, the Chicano community, psychedelics were really considered to be something that other people did. And it was sort of was in the same bucket as PCP or heroin. And so there just wasn't a lot of stories in our community about any healing power or any kind of background on what a psychedelic was. And it had just had a bad stigma. And so as we were going through and discussing this with various people, Oakland's a very diverse city. And so when we were determining which word to use, I think Larry and a couple other people were very familiar with the term entheogen and felt like that was the right term. And it's actually worked really well. It has enabled us to have good conversations. And Larry can explain more why the term hallucinogen wasn't also a good term for us.
Julie, you want to go ahead? Share anything? You also work with psychedelic as well, so maybe even kind of your thoughts on that whole process.
Yeah, it really is. I'm sort of repeating what Carlos said, but there's a stigma with these other words. They're already associated with things, and in some ways it's a positive association, in some ways it's not. So it's a neutral term that you're kind of reintroducing it. And so I'm just sort of repeating what Carlos said, but it really fits. And I don't have the definition of entheogen. I wonder if somebody has it in front of them and we could read that. Might be nice. I tried to look it up, but I didn't find the one I was looking for.
Yeah, I don't have the definition in writing, but I believe it's based off of the root of enthusiasm. So divine inspiration, those different types of things, this sort of inner spirit, inner sacredness, generating the divine within is kind of how people speak to it. A lot of times people think it means like God in the sky God, but really it's about spirituality. It's about sacredness. It's about inner sort of, divinity, if you will. And so those are the sort of the background for that. Now, in comparison to some of the other words, you have like hallucinogen, which would be sort of, fundamentally unreal. It's an illusion that happens outside. So there's this sort of dynamic that's happening there. Psychedelic comes from mind manifesting, and that was a term that was, I think, coined by somebody, Humphrey Osmond, in Saskatchewan, I believe. And although it actually comes from the term soul, psychedelic psyche is soul, but it kind of has become sort of mind manifesting, and now you're seeing a lot in psychedelic science. So it's kind of become a scientific term. It's kind of become these terms that doesn't really so much speak to this inner divinity, as you will, And then, as Carlos was saying, we spent a lot of time discussing what word do we use, how do we sort of discuss this, how do we get rid of all this baggage, especially Oakland, right across the bay from San Francisco. There is this definite dynamic that's happening there. So so we started trying to work with the word entheogen, and entheogen came up with that was by an anthropologist and others that were sort of ethnobotanists that were trying to figure out how do we talk about people having ayahuasca ceremonies or iboga ceremonies. We really can't call those psychedelic. That kind of really refers to a particular time frame, particular era. And so how do we sort of speak to this? And now it was a new word that was sort of developed to kind of discuss this, but the idea was really, and there's some arguments as to whether or not synthetics are also entheogens, and I'm okay to say, yes, that's very much a possibility, but at least how we engage with the conversation, we really try and refer to entheogen as natural plant and mushroom materials, things like that. So it really brings us back to that natural aspect, to that community-based ceremony, with the ancestors, those different types of things. And I think that was, it's so, people say, oh, well, you have to define this new word, maybe we shouldn't use it. And, for me, I think, I'd much rather spend 2 minutes defining a word than however long it takes to unpack 50 years or 40 years of conversation around what people think psychedelics is, which sometimes is psychedelic music or psychedelic art or all these other things, which are external again, and really wanted to focus back on that sort of interior experience if possible.
I'd like to add something, actually, because Larry's right that the term psychedelic is getting used more and more now by medical and technology and sort of human created stuff, which makes sense because a lot of synthetic compounds are also part of the psychedelic community family. Whereas entheogen is really plant-based, nature-based. And so we're seeing entheogen really used for more naturally occurring plants, fungi, but it's also seeming to become used more and more around humans, nature, and spirit, sort of this combination of humans, nature, spirit, and the interaction of all those, including ancestry. So it seems to have a more land-based meaning behind it. So they seem to be diverging into two directions: psychedelics towards commerce, towards research, towards science, whereas entheogens more towards nature, land-based, people, that kind of thing.
Thanks. That was really helpful for me. I often feel torn between contexts and different, discursive channels of how I'm supposed to talk about this, and I really appreciate reflections on that. So
if I may add just one thing that too, which would be even the conversation between drug and nature. I think that's another thing that we really try and look out for, because a drug, you typically think of something that, is produced, or, if you go far enough back, it would just be something that gives you sort of this sensation, but really wanting to sort of separate that out, because, in contemporary culture, a drug is something that's either owned by a pharmaceutical company or that has this sort of bad, maybe derogatory sort of framework around it. But nature is really something that just grows out of the ground. So that was another element we really try to avoid using the drug, if possible, on some of that, and then using the word nature, those type of plants and mushrooms and things like that.
Great. Well, one of the advantages of keeping questions broad is that you answer 3 questions at a time. So wonderful. Thank you. I can plug into some of the other stuff. So before getting into the resolution specifically, Bruce, did you want to chime in?
You have to unmute yourself. Bruce, you have to unmute yourself.
Bruce, can you hear? You're on mute.
Yeah, I guess I was. Sorry. didn't realize. Yeah, I just wanted to add into that antigen is actually an immunological term referring to certain structures, and as it devolves further and further into the quantum realm, it becomes quite apparent. But it also works the other way as a macrocosmic plane as well. I've been studying this for a long time, and I've got some theories I'm working on. I just need more data, but it's a broad subject, and it does need more definition. We just don't have that concept yet. And my hope is that each of us delve into it a little more deeply and find those answers for ourselves. But I've been involved in this field for a very long time. I'm very good friends with Larry Evans, who I've known for 40 years, I guess now. And, we have these discussions all the time. So, but antigens are, as far as we define it now, is immunological. And when we're dealing with that end of it, that is generally, that's a structured-based science that deals pretty much with, combating things as opposed to assisting things. So I want to turn that around. And I think that this endeavor is extremely important right now. Larry and I are trying to get together some psychosomatic mycophagy clinics for therapeutic uses. And I think, we're on the threshold of making this worldwide, but it needs to be accepted. Each state needs to pass the laws to allow it. And currently there are 3 here in the United States. There are countries that accept it, but anyway, no, I'm all in. I'm all in. So yeah, and thank you. I won't interrupt too much, but I just wanted to put in a little.
Antigen or entheogen?
Entheogen.
Entheogen. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Bruce. Thanks. I'm gonna Larry, are you raising your hand?
Please. Yeah. I think to kind of bring this back into focus, maybe to bring up the idea that names are very powerful, and that changing the names has been a very important way of both revealing and concealing knowledge. We see this especially with plants. I don't know if you're familiar with the recent discussion about changing the name of psilocybin or the psilocybe genus to Deconia, which there's a perfectly good reason to. But again, because of there was a reason to do this, which would obfuscate much of the research that had been done on these compounds before. But they realized that it was just too cumbersome to try and do this. But this has been done on a smaller scale with lots of different plant substances or plant medicines. And I think that, again, the nomenclature, or how we name things, becomes very important with what we're speaking of here. This entheogenic entheos, the connecting with the God within, certainly makes some assumptions that atheists might not be comfortable with. But on the other hand, I think psychedelia does carry some of the baggage, and certainly the whole concept of hallucinations and standard old school models of addiction, I think, are definitely being used in a negative way when, you know, again, simply because of commercial interests. And so I think it's really important not to fall prey to using the same vocabulary that people who are interested in, you know, capitalizing or profiting from this would use this same language. So I think it is vital that we have a good cohesive nomenclature, a good cohesive understanding of the names of the things that we're speaking about. And I think that it's been difficult. I see with the Denver group with the psychedelic justice people, they have really adapted a much more radical rhetoric. I think that in organizing, a lot of people see that sometimes you know, the solidarity speak becomes so powerful that it's sometimes difficult to communicate. But on the other hand, using colonial words to describe indigenous situations, or using, you know, objective white male-based terminology to describe, you know, BIPOC or people of color situations, this has made a lot of science really white and really male, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think that this needs to be addressed. Again, our taxonomy is key in this. Our nomenclature, the words that we use are really key in how we do this. So thank you. I probably rambled on too long, but yeah.
Well, thanks, Larry and Bruce. I want to make sure we have ample time to get into the resolution this evening. So I'm going to do one more big picture question, scrap the others, and get into the resolution if that sounds good. So I just, you know, something that's been coming up in our local conversations, and I really hope Carlos and Julie and Larry can give us some, you know, some pointers on this and talk about their experiences with, and again, this connects with nomenclature. So we often, so we're talking about a resolution. We have a resolution developed. We have a resolution passed off to local politicians. Other states, other counties, other districts have adopted different approaches, including citizen-led initiatives and local ordinances, different county level, state level engagement. So right now here in Missoula and in Montana more generally, we have a very local focus. So we're identifying the city as the primary basis of group action, and we're working with resolutions. What are your thoughts on initiatives versus ordinances versus resolutions? pros, cons, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I'd love to speak on this one if I may, initially anyways. We made a pretty clear decision early on that we were going to go the resolution route first, because we wanted to really get word out about our message, which is that the need for equitable access, the grow, gather, gift model, protecting rights for everybody to grow their own, consider these to be tomatoes, oranges, stuff you can grow in your own yard. They shouldn't be criminalized. This is nature's medicine for humanity. And so we wanted to get all these messages out, and we thought the best way to do that would be to pass things very quickly across as many cities as possible to impact the conversation nationally, because we already knew the conversation was coming from pharmaceuticals, corporations, and the medical realm. And we knew that we had to interject the voice of this voice of nature approach. And so we went quickly with resolutions. There was a lot of interest in doing initiatives, but initiatives can become very expensive. In fact, in California, it's about $30 to $50 million to pass a statewide initiative. In some cities in California, it's upwards of $1 million. So what happens when you start pushing for initiatives, particularly in big states or big cities, is that then you have to raise a lot of money from a lot of deep pockets. And typically they don't do that for free. Most often, if somebody's willing to contribute $2 or $3 million to an initiative, it means they want something in return. And that's when we start seeing the initiatives that perhaps started with good intention begin to transform to become about profiteering. And we saw that with cannabis. So our intention was really to hold the line and encourage all of our groups not to go the initiative route. With respect to an ordinance is different from a resolution. Is really just an opinion. It's where city council says, we think that this should not be criminalized, but a resolution can also tell your executive branch that they shouldn't spend money on something because typically the legislative body, the council, is in charge of budgets. So they can say, in most cities in the US, they can say to the executive branch, we don't want you to spend money on policing to arrest people. So that can also be part of a resolution. So there's a lot of power in a resolution beyond just an opinion to the world. But an ordinance, because it's a change in the code, it has to be read twice. And it actually changes the code. And when you do that, you are actually, in most states, if not all states, you would be usurping the jurisdiction of state law. So state code. And so that becomes against the law for your city to do. And that means that the state or the feds could then arrest your council members for violating their, what is in their jurisdiction. And so the resolution is the fastest, easiest way to get something passed. Now, though, that we've had our voice really heard, we're turning to state legislative changes, not initiatives, but state changes within our legislature. And that's what California is doing. The only reason we're sitting at the table with equal size seat, if you will, as pharmaceuticals and medical is because of how we rolled out over the last year and a half, pushing for resolutions, having our voice heard, advocating for nature, advocating for the most vulnerable, advocating for everybody to be able to access on their own terms.
Julie, do you want to share a little bit about maybe kind of the process, how it went from city to county there? Because I think you're the only city that's been successful.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was going to say too that we, in Ann Arbor, we had a lot of people on our team who have done ballot initiatives. And so when we came to the table, they were very ready in their back pocket to do that, not wanting to, but asking city council to do that. And if not, if you don't take it up or you don't vote on it, we will go the ballot initiative route. And we did believe it would pass. The other option that we had in Ann Arbor was you can, instead of getting a bunch, I don't know if this is true everywhere, but instead of getting as many signatures as you need to, you can ask city council to put it on the ballot. And so we had that as our kind of second back pocket thing that would help us with a lot of money, at least a fair amount of money. And so that was going to be our next ask. And we kind of put it out there for them. We're like, these are kind of our choices of what we're looking at. And, we had no issue with the resolution that passed unanimously, which was amazing. We didn't have to go further, but we were prepared to, and we kind of said that from the very beginning. And what was really cool, in Ann Arbor, like Larry mentioned, was that our city prosecutor, a really progressive, wonderful Ellie Savitt, had just won his election and was about to be appointed county attorney. And we reached out to him after our resolution passed. We knew he was progressive, and we thought he'd be on board. And we reached out to him and we said, "Hey, what do you think about our Ann Arbor resolution, our decriminalization that just happened, last week in Ann Arbor?" And he publicly said that he 100% supported our resolution. He was so happy to see it. And he made a statement that he then backed up in policy several months later that said he will not prosecute for entheogenic use and possession in the whole county. Not only did he do that, but he expanded our language and included things like small scale sales, and put back some language in the county policy that was taken out by city council, which was really important, about not allowing, the city council had taken out language about not allowing funding for prosecution. And the city council of Ann Arbor unfortunately took that part out. We were really upset about it. And then here comes the county prosecutor making statewide policy, or sorry, countywide policy, saying that, that he included that right back in, and then even expanded. So that was a huge, huge deal. It just happened to be right timing, right place, right person. It really wasn't, a lot of work on our part at that point, but it was a beautiful, beautiful thing to see a county-wide decriminalization.
Great, thank you, Julie. Yeah, and I think, the only thing I would just have to add to that is that, just to really sort of get back to the point that Carlos was saying about, the expense and the direct democracy aspect. Like, we can sit there on the street corner and talk to lots of people all day long and get signatures, but that keeps us one kind of arm's length away from government process. How does this work? For me personally, I had zero, I was so disillusioned with government and thinking things could change or any of that kind of stuff, and that's part of what's happening. Everything's crumbling because we don't think that we have a voice. We don't think that our city elected officials work for us. And, and this was a really great process for me personally to be like, wow, we do actually have an opportunity to engage with city council to make change happen on a local level. And I think that's another thing about this that's really great. Sometimes with initiative, you can kind of skirt around the city council, and that might be challenging or problematic. I don't know if Carlos wants to follow up on that, but I think in general, when you're working directly with them, it's really great to see, the city council sponsor, council member Nolgayo from Oakland, attending events and being there. It's not like we slipped one over on him. It was like, he's excited. He wants to help out. He wants to be engaged with the process. And we have an ally in the city council, and that's so important. And I think that's something that you just don't really see in kind of some of these other processes. This really allows us to engage directly with him. And I think that was, and other city council members as well. I know that Julie, one of the city council members, is now on your committees to do things. And so like they're part of our community as well. So bring them in. Yeah, Carlos, I don't know if you had something to say with that.
Well, just that it's the relationship that we built with our city council and going the resolution route, that is working with them to pass something, now we have long-lasting relationships with them. So now after we passed the resolution, we passed what's called the Oakland Community Healing Initiative, which is a protection of ceremony. And so so then we go from just enabling the individuals to have their own relationship with these plants to then protecting community-based ceremony, which is important for a lot of people to heal in ceremony because they're very vulnerable. They have a lot of trauma. So that was important, but we only did that because our council was already there with us. They already understood. They came along with us. We didn't go around them. We went right to them, and now they're part of our team. Just like I think in Ann Arbor, they're working together with their council.
All right, thank you. So I was, let's see, I saw Larry, your hand pop up during that. Did you want to throw something in?
One very quick comment, just that we have a very good county commission. All three members of the county commission are favorable in this case. So any way that we can leverage the city into the county type of situation, I think is, we'd be interested in looking at that as a process for sure.
I would say it's very much the same process, except counties tend to deal with healthcare, which is an even better benefit. If you can get the county, that'd be fantastic. but I don't know your local jurisdiction. So I may be speaking out of turn, but generally speaking, you can get a county, that's pretty good.
Wonderful. So let's see, just making sure we hit the resolution proper. Larry, are you up for doing a little screen share so that we can kind of talk through it? As Larry pulls that up, I'll just kind of give an intro to it. It's just broken into three sections. We have an introduction stating the resolution. We have a section of whereas, which is more or less a list of justifications for why this needs to come forward. And then we have a section on resolved. So those are the statements the city council is making to the local government, and sort of giving, thinking of it as a steering committee of sorts. That's the section where we're going to see what we're hoping the city what positions the city will take. All right, I'll leave it there.
Sure, and I have the Missoula one here that I helped to do, which is just kind of crafted basically off of what the Oakland one has. And I also have behind it the Ann Arbor one here. So if Julie wants to touch on any things that were different or were clarified or simplified in the Ann Arbor one, I can switch back and forth as well. And if you both want to keep your mics open, and then we can just kind of, as we go through here, offer any insights as each section goes through. So this is kind of the title here, amongst the lowest priority for the city of Missoula, but as Carlos was saying, also funding to make sure that, there wouldn't be any funding, which would then be de facto decriminalization. This whereas here, so as Tim was just saying, the whereas is kind of set the evidence, right? And then the resolves are like the action steps, right? So this whereas here basically defines entheogenic plants. I know for the mycology folks that there's plenty of in Missoula. You're probably upset it doesn't say entheogenic plants and fungi, but we did put mushrooms underneath plants, fungi under plants, so excuse us for that, but it makes it easier for some of the defining later on. So that's kind of just speaking about what is entheogen, what can it do, what are the possibilities. We really wanted to emphasize not just psychological health or medical benefits, but also personal and spiritual well-being, and to have the direct relationship to nature, the unalienable right to have our own relationship with nature, which is something many of us have been stripped from. And then next one, again, if anyone wants to jump in, Carlos or anyone, or Julie, you want to jump in? Here it's basically kind of talking about different conditions, and we could probably add something like PTSD in here as well, persistent traumatic stress environment. But basically, here's some things that are communities are dealing with, are working through, and all these sort of footnotes are different papers and things that we have that have showed that can be beneficial for this, as well as one thing that's really important. I think I've had a lot more conversations with cluster headaches folks than I expected over the process of this, because just to have something available, not have to go to a center or have to wait for somebody to give them the material, but have something growing that can always have accessible in case the cluster headache ever does come up. And Carlos, do you want to jump on maybe some ideas around PTSD or anything on that?
Sure, yeah, just to introduce the concept that, we're encouraging folks to use in tandem with PTSD. So we know what PTSD is, post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSD was recently coined by Dr. Sean Jenright. He's with the African American Studies Department at the San Francisco State University. He's a professor there. He's written a number of books, and his specialty is in doing radical healing in Black and Brown communities. PTSD stands for persistent traumatic stress environment or exposure. And that really defines the experience. When I heard it for the first time, I said, well, that defines my life as someone who was raised in an impoverished immigrant community in America. A lot of the stressors that the Black, Brown, Indigenous, low income, white communities, immigrant Asians experience from poverty, from lack of investment in their communities, from lack of access to jobs, the violence, the alcoholisms, the war on drugs. The trauma becomes so persistent that people live in a state of heightened anxiety as a matter of course, because there's always an expectation something is going to attack you, something's going to go wrong, and that's just sort of how you are raised. So that term then defines a lot of the struggle of the impoverished communities of America who struggle day to day to just make it. And the trauma is just chronic. So these plants have tremendous impact on people who live with PTSD by opening them up to a world of new possibilities.
And Julie, did you want to share anything about some of these challenges or some of these things as well? We'll probably go into them a little bit later, further down, but while we're here. I think you're muted.
I did mention before we actually started this official panel that Ann Arbor did actually take out diabetes in our resolution due to our medical advisors not able to find enough information. And so that was taken out. But Larry really feels like there's some really strong evidence there, and I'd be excited to take a look at that. But I think that was the only difference so far that we had in our resolution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some evidence around harmine or harmaline, which would be the Banisteriopsis caapi vine, being beneficial for diabetes. But I can maybe if we have some time, I'll see if I can send a link for a news article or something like that in the chat. So yeah, so that was that, and then, there's a bunch of other things, as we'll go through that later on, further down. Second thing, so this is even kind of how we sort of discuss this with folks. So we talk about sort of the science, right? We talk about sort of the personal testimony, what's worked for folks, and then the long history of tradition. And so here we have on this one really talking about, all the amount of time, 5,000 years for some peyote traditions, mushroom traditions, there's some cave paintings in Algeria, I think from 9,000 BC, which is about 11,000 years ago, right? Hold on a second. And then, and many other places. So we have, long history of use by not just medical practitioners, but religious, spiritual leaders, professionals, mentors, etc. This whereas is, people would like to improve their health and well-being. They fear arrest and persecution. Before I go too much farther, though, there's this footnote, which is the footnote for the entheogenic plants up here. We wanted to really specify what those were. So we refer to mushrooms, cacti, iboga-containing plants. So that not just iboga, but ibogaine-containing plants like star jasmine or bokanga, things like that. And then extracted combinations of plants similar to ayahuasca. So not just ayahuasca, but also you're looking at all the different, I think there's close to 4,000 combinations of DMT containing plants and MAOI containing plants that can be used. And then the indolamines, tryptamines, and phenethylamines, those are sort of the chemical components. Tryptamines would be the mushrooms, the iboga, the ayahuasca type plants, and then the phenethylamines would be the cacti. Anyone else have any? Okay. Slide on down. This section here, this section here has gotten us a lot of challenge over the many year and a half, because we used to have in here that also that the Native American Church considers peyote a sacrament. So we did take that wording out to their request, but we also want to make sure that people are able to grow, because obviously there's some concerns around vulnerability in the sacred gardens. So the more people that can grow, the more that will reduce the impact on that. But that also sort of touches on doctrine of religious freedom for the Santo Daime Church, the De Vegetal, which is another ayahuasca church as well. This one here, again, everyone just jump in if you want, or I'm just going to kind of go with the flow here. The United Nations doesn't consider entheogenic plant material to be Schedule 1, plants that are used for ritual purposes and ceremonial purposes. So they actually exclude this material. So we also just want to sort of acknowledge that in the whereas statement. These next four basically are looking at what types of things these different plants can be valuable for. So, so ibogaine, as I mentioned, can be really valuable for opioid addiction or methamphetamine addiction. I think there's some studies that show 38 to 40% success rate with ibogaine without much of a follow-up, compared to 10% roundabouts for typical traditional substance use disorder treatment, especially with opioid addiction, heroin addiction, things like that. I think what's really important about this too is, at least from the friends that I've talked to, it really helps to interrupt the withdrawals and interrupt the cravings, which allows people to sort of start anew, start fresh with that, rather than sort of, that's a lot of times with friends that I know that were trying to sort of get off heroin, that was always the stopping point. What happens afterwards, the withdrawal, the cravings, I can't handle that, I just want to go back onto it. So that actually helps with that, in addition to also getting into sort of the psycho-spiritual aspects that might be part of the substance issues. Here we have ayahuasca. And like I said, plants such as ayahuasca contains forms of DMT combinations. Can be, valuable for treating addiction as well. There's some treatment-resistant depression studies that have been out. PTSD work is happening as well. And also, as I mentioned, we really want to emphasize that it has personal and spiritual growth. So you're really hitting it on all these different layers when we're talking about what's going on here. Is there anything yet in here, Julie, that you guys slimmed down or simplified at all?
Yeah, I'm sitting over here thinking, but I'm not exactly sure what. And, as I'm looking at it, and I say that because, like I said from the beginning, I didn't have any political experience. So I went in relying on my team, and my team sort of made those adjustments. And that was the first resolution I ever looked at. So I really just kind of trusted in my team to make those changes. So I should go back and compare and contrast, but I'm not.
This is yours right here, I think. So it looks about, maybe just kind of simplified down a little bit.
Yeah, we just took some things out. We maybe changed a few words here and there, and otherwise we just took some things out just to have less for council to read. Mm-hmm. That was all really that we did, but I'm not even sure what specific parts, because these are the whereases. The be it resolved, we did not change at all. I mean, I think it was identical. So the actual action parts were not changed at all. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, so then we had this one about cacti containing mescaline. So that's for alcohol addiction. There's some studies on that. Also spiritual growth. It's also been used for a long time in many different traditions. Then we talk about a little bit about psilocybin, which is the one that, has got probably the most news right now. We got, the fast track FDA trials, the work at NYU and Johns Hopkins looking at end-of-life anxiety for hospice or terminal cancer patients. There's some studies that, suggest that reduces prison recidivism, can treat substance abuse. There's some nice, obviously they said the FDA trials show for treatment-resistant depression. And then although there's not a lot of research out there, hopefully there'll be more around cluster headaches, but there's a lot of anecdotal reports from people that have suffered from them that said there's nothing else that works quite like mushrooms do. And then, as I mentioned, we want to sort of broaden the scope as well. And so we talk about this Johns Hopkins study, because we're not just talking about, sick people, there's not, people that have health issues or challenges, but also what does it look like in terms of healthy normals. So this study came out in 2008, I believe, I think is the date. And looked at what are the benefits for somebody that isn't quote unquote sick or have a mental health issue or what have you. And they found that over 75% of the subjects considered the experience to be one of the most meaningful in their life, which is a really powerful statement. That was compared to the birth of their children or other different sort of significant moments in their life. So we just want to sort of highlight that in here to show that it's not just for folks that maybe have medical conditions, but also for anybody. And then here, basically just like looking at, okay, the city of Missoula wishes to declare not to expend any city resources, et cetera, et cetera. And then I'll let Carlos or Julie, maybe if you want to jump in on some of these resolves here, since these are the action steps that Julie was mentioning.
Carlos, definitely, yeah.
Oh, you want me to take it?
If you want, yeah, I mean,
sure.
Yeah.
So let's see. Oh, this is, okay. So these were changed to Missoula, I see.
Yes.
All right. That the mayor and city council will declare that it shall be the policy of the city of Missoula that no department, agency, board, commission, officer, or employee of the city, including without limitation, Missoula Police Department personnel, shall use any city funds or resources to assist enforcement of laws, imposing criminal penalties for the use. So this is the big one. This is, you can't use any city funds to enforce. This is the teeth. This is the power of the city. Most cities in the U.S. have the power to determine, city councils have the power to determine how to use their, how to set their city's budget. So that's the important one. It means that if a police officer wanted to enforce, he couldn't because he doesn't have any funds available to do enforcement. What's the next one? City of Missoula directs the city administrator to instruct the city, state, and federal lobbyists to work in support of decriminalization of entheogenic plants. This was actually ended up being a big one for us in California, because we directed our city lobbyist to do exactly this. The city lobbyist is now working with the state at the state level to support us to decriminalize at the state level. So in essence, he is working for the city city council, but now we can call them and say, hey, how are things going? What, you know, can you go talk to the, on behalf of the city, can you go talk to the senator's office, for example? So this is a good one for using city resources to help lobby at the state level. That the mayor and the city council hereby declare that it shall be the policy of the city of Missoula that the investigation and arrest of adult persons for planting, cultivating, purchasing, transporting, distributing, engaging in practices with, and or possessing entheogenic plants or plant compounds on the federal shall be amongst the lowest law enforcement. So this is just lowering law enforcement priority.
And can I say something about this really quick? Ann Arbor does not include adult. We don't have the word adult in there. And ours is for any age. We actually thought maybe city council will come back and say, no, we have to say adult, and they did not. And so ours does not have an age to it.
Nice move. We really encourage people to not restrict yourself. Let council restrict you, but try to get as much through without any kind of parameters or controls as possible. The truth is, what we know from cannabis decriminalization and legalization is all the scary stories that people are afraid of simply don't happen, haven't happened, right? So, so this is lowering the priority, and it's for planting, cultivating, purchasing, transporting. So it's basically grow, gather, gift, sharing. So it's pretty comprehensive.
One thing I just want to jump on this real quick too is one thing you're hearing in a lot of other places that people just want to talk about this one, and that's it. Oh, like we can't, you know, yes, we can decriminalize possession, but oh, heaven forbid you grow a plant. Now that's against the law. That means you need to go to jail, you know? So this is a conversation we've seen in other cities as well. And so I think this is so interesting in terms of how we're sort of engaging in it and sort of broadening the ideas about what it is to have possession, to be, you know, able to interact with nature, those different types of things. Because, you know, the common model is just talking about possession, but really talking about all these different things that I think is important.
And if you're talking about sitting with a friend who might have a lot of trauma and you want to help be a sitter and you give them some mushrooms, then now, you know, if you don't have distributing in there, then you might be in violation as the person giving the mushrooms. So that's a good word to have in there. And then the next one is that the mayor and city council call upon Missoula County District Attorney to cease prosecution of persons involved in the use of entheogenic plants or plant-based compounds. This is kind of the insurance policy. So you're saying to the police department, we're going to make this lowest priority, and we're not going to fund you for prosecution of, to prosecute, arrest anyone for possessing, distributing any of these entheogens. And now if for whatever reason it slips through the crack, we're going to ask the district attorney not to prosecute any persons involved in the use of entheogens. And of course, the district attorney oftentimes will represent areas much larger than the city. And so this is a great way of also encouraging it. You obviously don't have authority over the district attorney, but it's a great way for the city to tell the district attorney, we don't want you prosecuting anybody in our city.
And that's the beautiful thing that happened in Ann Arbor with Washtenaw County that Julie was speaking about earlier. Julie, you have any more sort of insight on that or thoughts? I mean, did you reach out? You reached out a little bit. He was all for it? So you kind of went through this process a little bit too, yeah?
Yeah, well, he was really running on a platform of ending the drug war. And he, you know, we watched his campaign. We listened very closely. That's why we reached out to him afterward for comment, because we were just kind of like a little something like, acknowledge this and what do you think about it? Really not expecting him to come out with a whole policy. We thought just the statement, I'm not going to enforce this in my county, we actually thought was going to be it, but that he actually came out with an expanded policy around it was pretty outstanding. Yeah. But it wasn't, honestly, I don't think it was anything that we did aside from all of the work that we did to say it was important in the city. And he said, listen, the biggest city in the county with all of the people in it, right, this is gonna be decriminalized, then like, I don't understand why we wouldn't just expand that to the county, was basically what he said.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one, was it's just, if any part of this is deemed to be illegal, then the rest of it is still valid. Standard clause in a lot of contracts and resolutions. The question by the Reshos was, is any of this, have we gotten pushback on any of this? Interestingly, because we've now passed similar resolutions in Oakland, Santa Cruz, Ann Arbor, Washington, D.C., Cambridge, and Somerville, the more cities that pass it, the more that city councils are just assuming it's probably okay. And it goes through more quickly now than it used to initially, because there's less anxiety by the city councils. It's now been vetted by 6 city attorneys.
Plus Chicago and Berkeley and a couple other places that have gone through process but haven't quite gotten there yet.
Thank you very much for running through the resolution. I am not 100% sure how we've made it available to the public. So I don't, just to put it out there so it's open access, but I want that to be, to be something we can do. So we'll figure that out, and we'll get it up on our Facebook page. And that way, and I'm not sure if our curator of the social media stuff is here tonight, but I think it's really good for people in the public in general to be able to look at that and give feedback. So we're getting down to about 28 minutes before we, if we're sticking to, our time frame, and I really want to leave time for 2 more things. One is for the panelists to kind of not be prompted by a question and to talk a little bit about, aspects of this conversation that are really near and dear to them and important and something that you want to kind of leave us with. And I also want to make sure we have time for people in attendance to join the conversation and share thoughts, feedback, discuss the resolution, or any other, any other a topic they want to address, in the whole world of all things entheogenic.
Sorry to interrupt, Tim. I just want to note that I have to be somewhere at 6:30 my time. So that's about 8 minutes from now. So I'll excuse myself quietly, but I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all.
Yeah, thanks, Carlos. Carlos, maybe we can start off with you, then leave us with some parting thoughts and things that are on your mind as this all moves forward.
Gosh, well, I'll go kind of big picture here because that's where my heart lives, I suppose. Just that, we're as humanity, I think we all get the sense, we have that instinct that we're at the precipice of something really important here as humanity in terms of dealing with the complexity of the problems that we have in the world. And I think we all instinctually know that these plants, if we've engaged with them, open us up to a wider array of solutions, as well as interconnectedness, compassion and interconnectedness with each other. So there is a lot of turbulence out there in the world right now with respect to, we are a model of abundance. We are not in this to make money. Not me, not Julie, not Larry. We're in this for love and compassion. And because we love this planet, we love the people on it, and we want humanity to thrive. But there's a lot of movements to seek scarcity, because scarcity means profits, and people don't necessarily mean ill. People aren't evil, but there's a lot of fear out there in the world, and there's a lot of desire to hoard. So we just have to be aware of that and stand our ground and push for this. Time is now. Obviously, we have a lot to gain by enabling plants to heal humanity across the world. So that's my last pitch.
Thanks for joining us tonight, Carlos. I really appreciate your time. Thank you. Julie, Larry?
I did send or add a Scientific American article. There's a bunch more too that talk about diabetes and the Banisteriopsis campivine, or the harmaline. So that could be something to look at a little bit later. But yeah, I agree with Carlos. We're in a very interesting time right now where there is a lot of different movement happening. There are people that are, have different particular sort of ideas of what this might look like, that are based in sort of more of a fear or control model, and really just like reminding ourselves that, like, our ancestors have been, probably every person here has ancestors that has worked with plants at some point in time. This is something that's been going on for a really long time, well before the medical model existed or the clinical model existed. And so I think just tapping into that and really sort of acknowledging that, we're at the very beginning stages of culture that's been ripped away from everybody across the planet for thousands of years. And it's going to take some time and effort to build that culture again and to make it, to figure out what is it like to be in community? What is it like to engage in ceremony practices in community and integrate in community? Because community is where life is, it's good to do it in a clinical office, that type of thing, but that's still sort of separated, still sort of distant, but really sort of learning in community together, figuring out how to grow plants, like, everyone's sort of this immediate, like, how are we going to do this right now? And it's like, yeah, to grow some plants, it'll take some time, but like, imagine the abundance if we continue to sort of work on this process and really sort of engage and build beautiful community gardens that are sacred, and you know, find ways to connect with people who are working with sacred plants and learning new techniques. You know, I mean, you hear that a lot with cannabis, is there's so many people doing very interesting things across the world, but didn't ever talk about it to each other because of the legal nature. And then as soon as it sort of became a little bit more normalized, became a little bit more sort of okay to talk about, the stigma reduced, then all of a sudden all these new sort of insights were coming out about how to make things happen in terms of that. So I think in the same way, there's a lot of people that have technologies, quote unquote, you know, plant technology, if you will, not technology, in other ways, techniques, maybe is a better term, that, you know, once we start coming together, you know, we noticed this in Oakland, you know, we sort of passed the resolution and all of a sudden it reduced the risk. And now there's a lot more people talking about this in areas that we didn't even really know were talking about it already. And they've been doing it for a while. It's just like, we just opened up the door to allow that conversation to happen. I think that's another part that we're really trying to sort of do. You know, sometimes people are like, well, what are the exact steps? How does this look? What's the exact framework? And we're really trying to step back and say, let's see what emerges. Let's see what people bring to the table. Let's see what different kind of conversations are happening. And I think that's another thing that it takes a little bit of, like, you know, really, you know, okay, we're just going to sort of allow this to emerge, but it's so beautiful to see the conversation, something that, you know, you can't just say, this is how you do it, but like learning together, you know, as a culture. I think that's really important.
I want to say too, there's such an art in that. And I definitely have recognized that quite a bit for both Larry and Carlos. There's an art to allowing to really have that true trust, that true knowing that this movement is done so with the best intentions and is really clear and in clear conscience. And then moving forward with that, with this trust, because that's really what laid the framework, I feel like, for the national decrim movement, is the level of trust that you guys have in the people and the groups that you're working with and in the work itself, right? And that has really come through because you guys really have allowed each city group or each statewide group to really kind of make it their own, which I know is maybe really challenging to do a lot of the time, especially when you put so much, you know, so much of yourself and dedication and care and love and craft into it. And so there's such beauty behind how you guys have done that. I think it's really outstanding. And it allows the movement to thrive. It allows it to thrive, right? With too much sort of control over things and making sure it's exactly how you would do it, or, you know, you pick those points that are important and you stick to those and you let everybody else kind of, you know, figure out the rest. And with always being there to be supportive and helpful, and it's just incredible. So yeah, you guys have really done something amazing here. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That was really beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the panelists for dropping in with the Montana decrim scene this evening. I just so appreciative that you were able to join us. And I also really want to, I know Carlos, you're going to dip out in a minute here, but I really want to finish off tonight with, you know, community participation with people here in Montana and elsewhere. I know we've got Philadelphia decrim here, and we've got some people that I'm sorry I haven't had an opportunity to meet before, some familiar faces who are doing work here in the region. So I don't know, I'm hoping that you all chime in and share some thoughts or questions with our panelists.
I have a question for Larry and Julie. Does this resolution protect practitioners or therapists who might be doing psychedelic assisted therapy? And what's the difference between this and what was passed statewide in Oregon?
Julie might know that from the therapist side, and then I'll maybe touch on that. Oregon.
Yeah. So how I feel, you know, whether I'm not an attorney, and again, I'm not a politician. So my feel on our resolution and how that plays out in my role. Well, first of all, I'm not licensed in the state of Michigan. And so, you know, there would be some issue with licensure if I was practicing a modality that's not approved, right? So that's the first thing. I'm not licensed. I'm not worried about that. What I can say is that you know, our resolution did not pass for any kind of sales. But I kind of think of it in terms of a service, as I'm kind of offering a service to somebody. Then I can have a number of things included in that service that really kind of, and that's how I look at it, you know, again. And so I could offer like some food, I could offer some substance, I can offer, you know, some of these various things. And just being very loose about the language. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I am interpreting it.
And I would say kind of the difference between this and like an M109 model is that, first of all, you know, you can do this for nothing or $100 or whatever. The M109 model is, I've heard on the low end, $800, on the high end, $5,000 for somebody to sit with. And that's just not something that typically most people can afford, at least nowadays. Maybe those prices are different, you've heard differently, but that's something I heard from the leaders of the M109 movement. And also there's a lot of time that happens with that. You know, there's a prep, there's a presentation, there's an integration, all that kind of work that's happening. Also, I believe it's, you know, state run. The Oregon Health Authority is the one that's running it. It's going to be a few, you know, mushroom growing places that are also state run, as far as I understand, that are going to be growing it, you know, running it, and it just keeps it out of the community. You know, it's all state run. Okay, well, that's great, but like, how do we engage in the community? How do we do these practices in the community? How can we sit with each other? And I think there's also, like, you know, a dynamic, as Julie was saying, is there's a licensure issue and there's the insurance issue. I'm not sure how Oregon is even fixing that, to be honest, because, you know, that's still something that they probably have to figure out, right? Because how are they going to get insured? You know, is it, you know, if there's a federal, I don't know how boards work with therapeutic stuff, but if there's a federal board, is there a concern there, you know, and have they thought about that? I know they're trying to line it up with the FDA trials, but what does that mean in terms of, you know, because there's almost like a law above the law, right? Which is the licensure, and it is the insurance and all these other things, not practicing, you know, medicine without a particular license or what have you. So I'm curious to see how that rolls out. You know, it's going to take, you know, the thing about this that's different is it's not going to take us 2 years to figure out how to do it. You know, there's 50 pages in that document, and it's going to take them 2 years to figure out the rules. It's going to cost Oregon $7 million, $3 million a year just to figure out the rules for the next 2 years. And these resolutions are, you know, done pretty quickly and doesn't cost much of anything. And in fact, from the perspective of city council, it costs them, you know, less because you're not spending funds on policing, you know. So that's the benefit of decriminalization versus legalization, because we're not asking somebody to put together a difficult regulatory process or something that's going to be tricky in terms of, you know, their mindset of how do I make this work. I know it's something that even in Berkeley, they were like, oh, we got to figure out what the shelf life is and I was like, oh, you don't have to do anything. Just make it not against the law. It's not, you're not thinking like cannabis. It's not, this isn't a cannabis scenario, that type of thing. So I think that, you know, I mean, it's good that model happens, you know, I mean, it helps everyone see what's going on, but I mean, to be biased, I'm really excited about what's going on in California in terms of the California state legislation. Because it allows for grow, gather, gift. It allows for community sharing. It allows for community-based practice. It allows for not for financial gain, but the subtext of that is if somebody wants to do ceremony or other services, you know, reasonable payment for those services is not considered financial gain. I think that's really great. So you know, we're still kind of working through this process, but I think, you know, legislation like California's that just came out really shows another way, because everyone's like, we have to do the M109 model, and that's the way I have to go. And well, let's try other things. We don't have to be, you know, this is the beginning stages of a lot of stuff. We can kind of expand it out and see, does this work here? What does this look like? You know, how can we improve on things and things like that? So I hope that answers, but there's a lot going on there for sure.
Great, thank you. That's so helpful.
I can see that there's some good stuff going on in the chat box. Do people who are entering there want to share their insights or experiences or questions with the panelists? Or, you know, there's just some good comments going on in there, and wondering if people want to bring them forward in kind of a more auditory manner.
Okay, so hi. All right, so yes, I've identified, as we were speaking, Kristen Pabst, if anybody knows, our Attorney General for the Missoula County Attorney, Kristen Pabst. Please reach out to her and invite her to these meetings and share this with her as well. I would like to know what kind of hiccups Ann Arbor's been experiencing, if there are any, and what is the M109 model exactly? Would you please elaborate upon that? Thank you.
M109 is the Oregon statewide ballot initiative that passed, allowing psilocybin therapy, specifically by therapists. Yeah. So I'm sorry, what was the Ann Arbor question? Will you ask that one more time? Oh, pitfalls. You asked about pitfalls. Yeah, I mean, since, you know, I don't see any pitfalls. I don't, there's no, you know, increase in, you know, we haven't seen any like public health problems, right? And I know this is true of Oakland, and this is true of Santa Cruz, and this is true of everywhere that's decrim so far. There's been no public health issue. I would say, you know, in terms of looking forward, what I really want to see is something that's happening a bit in Denver, is being able to educate and train multi-responders who may encounter somebody who's under the influence of some type of entheogen or psychedelic, and teaching them, you know, the difference between someone who is, you know, hopefully it's not always 100% identifiable, but someone who may have taken a substance and someone who may need like actual mental health care, and what is the difference, and how do you approach somebody who is, you know, who's having a difficult experience or under the influence, who might need some help, who you might end up responding to. So we're really looking forward to working with, I hope it will happen, we're working on it, to work with the public health department and the police and the paramedics and whoever are, you know, the first and multi-responders, to try to navigate this a little bit more smoothly than maybe it's going so far. But there has been no increase, I can say, so far, in like hospitalizations, emergency room visits, police interactions with those under the influence of these substances.
And in fact, now you have cities all across Michigan that are excited. So yeah, that's the benefit, the non-pitfall, right? Like you really gotten that voice out there. So.
I sort of have a follow-up question about that. You mentioned, you know, first responders and them being prepared to handle those situations. I'm wondering whether in Ann Arbor or elsewhere where this has passed so far, is there any coordination with already established harm reduction services and projects and people who are doing that kind of work?
Yeah, there is. I think Denver is working with MAPS specifically in creating a training. One of the things that we've talked to them a little, we've talked to MAPS about their multi-responder training that they're developing. One thing about our movements and our like vision for what we're doing is we want to keep everything as local as possible. And so we're very wary to link up with those kind of like really like corporate resources in that way. And so, yeah, we're hoping that we can do it with the resources that we have locally. And, you know, and we'll see how that goes, but we're very dedicated to that.
Sure, I think that's a great idea. I think that keeping it in the community is awesome. And I know that there are lots of people who have those skills, whether they have the training or not, to either be a guide or be a sitter or be somebody that somebody in need can reach out to, and not even need to make it to the police or the paramedics or whatever. They're like, I think it would be great if there was some sort of locally established, community-oriented first point of contact.
Yeah, and I will say that, you know, we have Michigan Psychedelic Society here in Ann Arbor, and we often get those calls from people, calls and emails like, help, you know, I took a little too much, or, you know, whatever. We actually do get that from time to time. Making that more expanded and more accessible would be good.
And I just want to sort of lift up what Julie was saying there, is that, you know, what's really important about all this is building that local culture, you know, and if we just keep letting people sort of take over and say, oh, we're the professionals, we'll do it, then that local culture won't happen. And that's really so important in this, because like, then you can talk to your friend, then you can talk to your neighbor. At some point in time, you can talk to the person you're going to work with, whatever, like just to have that conversation locally, I think is so important. because again, we're building something that really doesn't belong to anybody. It belongs to all of us at the same time. And the nice thing about local culture too is you get to learn new things. Like, what's the Ann Arbor way? What's the Santa Cruz way? What's the Oakland? What's the Missoula way? There's going to be different ways, different approaches, different ideas. And I think we're really in a special space to really sort of explore that right now.
Well, I'm really excited that you guys are talking about having this conversation. I spent a lot of years in mental health care settings with adolescents, and I really wish that these conversations were happening 15, 20 years ago. I mean, maybe they were, and I'm just ignorant of it, but it'd be nice to see that these insights that you're all sharing be incorporated into our healthcare models. So let's see. I really want to encourage people to jump in and ask questions or share insights or comments, but so I'll just quiet, and then if no one jumps in, I'll jump back in.
Sure. Another question. Are there other community partners that we have engaged so far? Perhaps, I'm not even sure who we might reach out to, but are there other community partners that we are working with or that we are interested in working with that you think would be valuable to include in this conversation?
I mean, locally in Missoula?
So we've, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, but Michelle.
Oh, well, this is a brand new thing, Hannah. We just started meeting at the end of, well, I think it was like maybe loosely beginning of November. So we're just in the midst of the very beginning portion of it. Thank you for coming along, and we're so glad you're here. And Tim, you can talk further into it. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, as conversations have been evolving, and as people start showing up, participating, sharing their insights, and we have sort of developed a tentative framework for engagement. And I might as well just, share that we have goals of, all of us here in Missoula have various, connections, friendships, professional relationships with people in various sectors of, Missoula. So for example, in healthcare, several of us are able to connect with the therapeutic community, with people who are LCSWs, LCPCs, LACs, we intend to reach out and talk with law enforcement and do public. One of the main motivating factors in this series has been public education and building partnerships. But as Michelle was saying, this is all fairly new, and it's on the table, and it's things that we're looking at. It just has not reached that yet. However, I think that I would encourage anyone who is here tonight to take it on themselves too. It's like, hey, there's this group in our town, and they're talking about decriminalization, and here's some information. Join us for a meeting. We meet weekly. We have monthly public education forums. So I think that's part of how these grassroots movements grow, are people who are engaging at initial stages. They're carrying it forward. And like Larry was saying, sorry, Juniper, I'm talking right now. Thank you. Sorry, I'm acknowledging a 4-year-old's outfit. It's awesome. And so anyway, that's just to say that I really hope you will all bring people in and feel empowered that this is ideally going to be an entirely non-hierarchical local movement. So, I would encourage you to talk to people and reach out to your professional and personal contacts. Well, yeah, Mr. Evans.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. What were we talking about? Oh, we did want to bring up, I think, the point that, oh shit, I got that technological thing and now I can't even remember what I was trying to say. How embarrassing. But we were wanting to, Never mind.
It'll pop back into your head as soon as we, you know, in 30 seconds, it's going to show up.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
That's the worst of it for sure.
Well, I just want to interrupt.
Yeah.
I'm interrupting you, Larry and Tim, pardon me, and just want to go back to what stood out for me for tonight is the whole love and compassion aspect of why we're here. And I want to, you know, bring it back. So we have 4 minutes left into this, and bring it back to the love and compassion, why we're here. And to also bring it back to, this is decriminalize nature, brings this to our community so that we can strengthen community and continue that dialogue. Can you please go on with that? Love and compassion as our root nature. Thank you. All right, go ahead, Julie, Larry, talk amongst yourselves and that, like, you know, love and compassion, ending in love and compassion. Thank you.
I think I'll just maybe I have a different, slightly nuanced view of love and compassion, right? Love is sometimes fierce. It's standing up for what you believe in. It's saying, hey, this is what's important in life. It's not everyone is on the same team. If there's one team that's trying to monopolize and one team that's trying to create abundance, they're at a difference there. So now you can work together with them. That's important. But I think we have to be a little cautious around, like, everyone's the same, everyone, hey, because sometimes that can get a little tricky. And I think compassion is a great word to use, because compassion is sitting with somebody no matter what's happening. You're not trying to make it better. You're not trying to make it worse. You're just, I'm sitting with you. I'm there for you. I'm with you. And let's work through this together. And I think that's a really great way to really think about this movement, and everything in general is just like having compassion for each other, really sitting with each other, having dialogues that might be difficult or challenging, you know, working through things that might be trickier, you know, or you know, maybe people will butt heads a little bit, but to really sit there together and really sort of have compassion about it, because, you know, that's, you know, I mean, the rubs are where the interesting things happen. When you have two people disagreeing, where that disagreement happens, some really beautiful things can emerge, you know? And so I think that's really, you know, really great terminology to use for this, is both this love and compassion, but understanding that there's also this sort of fierce aspect to this, or this sort of, this rough, raw aspect to compassion as well. I think it's important to sort of talk about.
Yeah, and I would like to add, and I mentioned this before, that Larry and Carlos have really set a tone for Decrim Nature in a way that allows each person who's participating to really trust in their own conviction and really trust in their own empowerment. And for me, it was about just pure passion and this knowing that what I was doing was right. What I was doing was good and had really good intentions and pure intentions behind it. And so there's a sense, like what Larry just said, about sometimes you do need to stand up, you know, so it's not all just, okay, I'm going to sort of let it happen, but it's about being active and taking action. And sometimes that is disagreeing with people, you know, in a compassionate way, or really standing up for what you know is true and what you know is right. And that's really the foundation that I am working from, and where I see this perseverance to continue moving forward with that knowing behind the work that I do.
Thank you. Yeah, heart emoticons, celebratory emoticons, all sorts of custom emoticons to our panelists tonight. Thank you so much for being with us. It's super important to make local and national connections and transnational connections in doing this work. So we're at time, we're at 90 minutes. And in a Zoom culture, currently a Zoom culture, that can be hard. So thank you all for setting aside time this evening to be a part of this conversation. And I see that somebody has just joined us. Hello, Eric.
Yeah. Thanks for joining. Thank you, Tim. I'm going to thank you, Tim, for moderating. Thank you, Larry and Carlos and Julie. We appreciate everyone here and this whole movement, love and compassion. And I think what I you know, coming from my background and everything, I'm just going to say in summing up, that radical hospitality, you know, you make space and you use it in a non-judgmental way and in the best way possible, where we are in it together and we just share it. Radical hospitality. It's a great lesson to learn. So thank you for this moment in time, and I'm glad we can share it all together.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you, Michelle and Tim and everyone, and Julie and Carlos, who's here in spirit. It's really beautiful to kind of unpack this and chat with you all. And I'd love to engage in this dialogue with you, especially Julie. It's been fun. We've been meeting a lot. So
yes, it has. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thanks for everything. We appreciate being on this journey with you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a beautiful night.
See you hopefully next month. See